We know that you like throwing your potential Cavaliers trades into the NBA trade machine, but will they actually work? Yossi Gozlan of the Third Apron podcast and newsletters here to break down the second apron, teach us about it a little bit, and of course, we'll have some fun as always on the latest episode of Courtside with the Cavs on SI. Man, oh man, am I excited about today's episode. As always, Spencer German, Spencer Davies, my partner in crime, and our special guest today, Yossi Gozlan of the Third Apron podcast and newsletter. Yossi, cannot thank you enough for taking some time. I know it's a busy time of year, especially with the draft, round 2 today. So thank you so much for joining us on the show, man. Thank you.
No, of course, and it's my pleasure, especially with the Cavs. We got to work a little overtime to decipher their situation because their stuff's confusing.
It definitely is, and that's why we're having you on, because the one thing, like Spence and I, we go back and forth on so many different topics as far as this team is concerned. But like, there's always these moments where we start talking about cap stuff, and we're like, well, yeah, they could do this. And then even Spence, who I consider like the basketball expert truly on the show, he's always like, yeah, I just don't know if I can venture down that path because even I don't know how that works. So I think we're both going to learn some things today. I know we're both really excited, Spence. I'm glad we're getting a chance to do this, man, for sure.
Most definitely, and especially, I mean, I already got things that I want to ask right off the bat to Yos, but I mean, feel like, pay the favor back a little bit. Went on Yossi's show about a month ago, and now I got him on ours, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I love it. We love collaborating like this. And I guess I'll start us off, Yossi, with like the very basic question that I think, real quick, by the way, anybody who's watching in real time with us live, especially on whether it's YouTube or Twitter, send us questions. If you have questions about the second apron, if you have questions about the Cavs cap situation in particular, Yossi will answer them while he's with us today. We'll certainly get them in a little bit later in the show. So do not hesitate to ask any questions that you might have. We're treating this kind of as a second apron or an NBA cap 101, if you will. So, but I'll start us off with like the real basic bare minimum question of just, when it comes to the second apron, what are like the most important things that people need to know about it and the restrictions that come with it for a team potentially like the Cleveland Cavaliers?
Well, let me pull it up, have them all in front of me because there's a lot. I've been tweeting out these graphics that I've made whenever a team has done a significant move. Once the Cavs do something, I'll probably let it out. But for the most part, I mean, I'll basically list both apron restrictions since they're restricted to both. So teams over the first apron, they got to do 100% salary matching, which I think is the most significant thing as far as the Cavs. So when you look at some of the trade rumors that they've been involved with in recent days, like Kevin Durant, they would have to get to that $54 million. But because they're over the second apron, they actually can't really do that because they also can't aggregate players. They can't combine salaries to reach that $54 million, which means that they would have to get below the second apron first. So instead of like sending out $54 million, you actually got to send out like $70 million at the end of the trade, both to match for Durant and to get below the second apron. I think it would have, because they're like 12 or 13 million over it right now. They also cannot acquire free agents in a sign and trade. They cannot send out cash in trades. They can't sign and trade their own free agents to get players back under contract. Like they could sign and trade Ty Jerome, for example. They just wouldn't be able to get a player back. They have to get like picks, cash, stuff like that instead. And they have no form of the mid-level. So those are the major ones. So basically the Cavs, unless they start getting below these aprons, they're restricted to re-signing their own free agents. So Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill, their draft picks. I'm not sure if they have any. I think they have a second round pick tonight. And then
They have
just,
two, I think, actually.
And then just minimum signings. That's really all they can do unless they're trading one of their players for cheaper players back in return. So those are the restrictions.
Okay. Yeah.
No. I was just pointing out that we had two picks tonight, 49 and 58. But
Yeah.
no, Spence, I was going to give you the floor for what you had.
No, I was giving you the floor next because I figured we could kind of go like alternate here unless we have a follow-up.
I can do
so
it.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I didn't know because I
tried
know
to,
you
I tried
had
to
like.
text it. I tried to text it to you, so I was trying to like make it a thing without making it a thing in the pod, and now here we are bringing it to the pod, so it's okay.
Oh, you're good, man. No, I just know you had like 20,000 questions for Yossi, but I guess the first thing, this is kind of non-Cavs related, but very relevant to what's going on in the Eastern Conference. And Brad Stevens just had a press conference talking about he didn't really know what the second apron was really going to present until it actually happened to him. And as we see, Boston and all the trades they've gotten involved in the last 48 hours, moving a ton of talent, Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday, and, kind of just reorganizing things. I think a lot of people are seeing these moves and they're saying, oh, Boston's being active and they're like figuring out a way to do things, but it's not necessarily improving their talent. This is kind of just a reality of the NBA at this point when it comes to second apron and trying to be under that so you have more flexibility. What do you think of what Boston's done? Does that have anything to do with what the Cavs may see coming up? And what does it mean for the league overall?
I think with Boston, a lot of it isn't so much about the money. I think there is part of it is, well, Tatum's now hurt, so they're not going to be back in it for like another 2 years. How good are Porzingis, Drew Holiday, to an extent, Derek White? How good are these guys going to be when they come back? So since like this team they put together really only had like a 2-year window, now Tatum's injuries hurt. Like it only makes sense for them to do what they're doing. So with the Cavs, I think it's different where they're going to have a very expensive team because not necessarily like the aprons, but now there's a new luxury tax system. It's going to be more expensive the deeper in the tax you go. So now I think as I look into it, I think I was thinking early on they might look to save money. That's something we discussed, Spencer, when I had you on the show last month. I was thinking maybe they look to trade Jared Allen early. Maybe they look to trade Okoro, try to get below the second apron. But, as the water, as the smoke settled, we hear more about the Cavs injuries. Darius Garland was basically like playing with a major injury. Everyone was hurt. Like it's hard to they basically had no chance when all the injuries happened at once. So I think especially now that the East is even more open than it was a month ago, I think the Cavs are probably going to be motivated to spend as much as they are. With Garland's injury, I think now there's a better chance because he's going to miss the start of the season, they'll actually bring back Jerome. So I've kind of changed my mind on that since we last spoke. And I think they're going to look to spend as much as possible this year and next year, try to win a championship within these next 2 years. Maybe after that, they might consider looking to take a little bit of a step back. Then Donovan Mitchell will have his player option coming up. So maybe there's a decision to be made there because the roster is going to get even more and more expensive as time goes on. So I think that's kind of the way to look at it now. They're going to go for it as much as they can these next 2 years and figure it out later once they cross that bridge.
Just to clarify, we talk about this team as if they're going to be a second apron team. Is that simply based on, Yossi, the fact that like right now you're still in the 2024-25 league year until the new league year officially starts? Like they're not a second apron team yet until the new league year begins. Am I correct on that?
Yes and no. Like right now they are like below the tax and the aprons, but if they're trying to do a trade now, it has to be something that also works next year. It's kind of complicated, but they can't circumvent the cap and do aggregation, increase their salary in a trade anyway like that. They've added mechanisms. I've explained it on my newsletter. I did a whole Twitter thread about it in regards to the Desmond Bane trade because there was an element of that. So in all, like even though they're technically below the tax, below the aprons, no, they are very much actually operating as if they are above the aprons right now. So any trade they do has to be something that also fits their salary cap structure for next year.
Okay. And as a quick follow-up to that, because you mentioned you can't aggregate salaries when you're a second apron team. So you can't, like if the Cavs wanted to combine Jared Allen and just theoretically like Dean Wade or something like that, you can't do that in a trade package. What are the ways around
Right.
that? Is it simply what Boston did, where it's like you shed some of these guys first, and then trade the one player that you're trying to trade? Or are there, once you get other teams involved, like what could that look like as well? Like what are the ways you kind of work around that?
I mean, they just have to, if they want to open up if they want to get out of those restrictions, they're going to have to save money first. Now, it's not the type of thing where they have to exclusively do two separate trades where they get under the second apron first and then do an aggregation type trade. They can do it where it's like maybe a big 3-4 team trade. Let's say there's someone they want to bring in that requires, I don't know, just as an example, combining Okoro and Wade. So, let's say they want to bring like a $15 million player. As long as they, at the end of the trade, get below the second apron as well, which means they're also sending out another expensive piece, then they can also fulfill that trade, which usually requires, being below the second apron. So it's all about where they are at the conclusion of the trade.
So along those lines, sorry, Spence, real quick. So the way I'm sort of picturing is like they have to have both those trades already in place, though. It can't be like, well, we're making this trade and then we're making this trade like 3 days later. It kind of has to be like they all get agreed to at the same time, essentially.
Oh, no. You could do one or the other.
Okay.
I mean, you could agree to a trade right now. They could agree to a trade that requires them to have done, reduce their payroll first. But I'm saying that they can either do like the salary reduction trade and then do the aggregation trade, or they can kind of combine it all in once, as long as at the end of the trade, they are below the applicable apron.
So the only thing you can't do is do the aggregation trade first. They have to do a trade first that's going to allow them to get under the cap, and then you can do the aggregation trade, essentially.
Or they could do one mega trade that gets them under it. Well, they could do one that does both at the same time. Yeah.
Okay.
It's harder, but technically they could do that.
I got you.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Spence.
So when I heard you earlier in talking about how the Cavs are going to spend what they need to get to that next level because of where the Eastern Conference is now, what is your idea of them kind of going all in, especially if they are kind of hampered by the second apron stuff?
Well, I mean, I don't know what more all in they could do. I think their roster is already pretty set. They have I think they proved that, winning 64 games, they have a really good deep team. I just think they need for the most part, just run it back. And like, I don't really envision them looking to save money now. So like they already are kind of like all in a way. Now it's more so how many, how will you bring back one or both of Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill? I mean, they're already going to spend like $350 million most likely this year, if not more. So it's just about if they keep the team, that's like as all in you could get.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And what would you say moves on the margins? And I think we talked about this at length too when we went on your episode. Like, what do those kind of constitute to you? Like, is that trying to, like you said, they're not trying to save money, but say they're not happy with what their 9th and 10th man are getting them? Like, is that something that you could see them improving that part of their roster and maybe not necessarily the core and the top players?
Yes, I would guess that if like Okoro, for example, let's say they haven't moved off from him yet, and into the season, he's more or less producing the same he was last year. I would imagine they'll try to move him, not try to maybe bring in someone a little cheaper, so you save a lot of money there. That might be it realistically. I think at this point, I don't really see them trading Allen unless they get a lot of positive value in return. So yeah, it would probably be more marginal stuff, like which end of bench guys are more expendable.
And it sounds like that's something you think is fair, especially after we watched Indiana and Oklahoma City get to the title game and the title series, and they are boasting guys that, are deep, 8 to 9 to 10 guys deep, and it seems like this is the direction of the NBA now, whereas maybe 10 years ago it was about big three, and then you could surround them with, those minimum contracts and not have to necessarily be so into development. It looks like a lot of these teams are realizing, look, if we've got young talent that we know are on rookie contracts and could contribute now, that's going to save us a lot of the time that we need, and also save us from having to move our best players who we're paying a ton of money to.
Yeah. And they've done a good job at that, getting players on the margins in the past few years with Ty Jerome, with Sam Merrill. So I was thinking when we spoke last month, I was thinking that maybe they would let those guys go so they can elevate, Jalen Tyson, Craig Porter Jr., and to an extent, yeah, I think they will look to give those guys a bigger role. But we'll see if they keep both Ty, Jerome, and Sam Merrill. But I think they're also going to work really hard, try to find more players on the margins for the minimum, whether it's their second round picks, some guys they can get on a two-way. They're going to need to find a couple more rotation players to be able to fill in some roles as the team gets more expensive. And I mean, they've had success doing it, so I'm sure they'll find some more gems in the future.
Yossi, you talked earlier about the mid-level exception and how the Cavs as a second apron team, I believe is what you said, is that they won't have that because they're going to be a second apron team. Can you just start from scratch with level exception? Because it's one of those details of the cap that I understand, like, once the money's there that they can allocate it in different ways. But I sometimes I think I get confused with it in terms of what qualifies a team for it, the different levels to it based on where you are, like if you're a tax team, an apron team, etc., and then how they can sort of divvy that money up if they're using it in multiple transactions or just one.
By the way, I'm trying to share my screen. I want to show all the restrictions. Do you guys see that?
We do not.
Yep, see it in the bottom. So what you would have to do.
Oh, I see it now. Yes.
Yeah, here we go. Now we're talking. Okay, sorry, Spencer. What was the question again? Because I wanted to get this out for you guys.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. We appreciate this. No, so my question was just about the mid-level exception in general, and like walk me through, like I'm a 5-year-old, I guess, like where the mid-level like how teams qualify for the mid-level exception, the different levels of the mid-level exception that teams can get, and also, I guess, like how you can allocate that money. Like, can it be used across multiple transactions, or is it just one single transaction?
So the new CBA has basically implemented 4 different spending tiers. You got the lowest, which is a cap space team. They get the room mid-level, which is $8.8 million this year. Only the Nets and Grizzlies should have that. Then you've got where most of the league is. You got the teams that are below the aprons. They get the full tax mid-level, that 14.4. And then if you're above the first apron but below the second, you get the 5.7 million. So that's teams like the Knicks, most likely. And then you've got the Cavs and the Suns, only teams right now over the second apron who get no form of the mid-level, which again goes back to what I was saying. They're basically restricted. When you look at all these restrictions that they've got, very hard to pull off trades, no mid-level exception or biannual. You basically are limited to re-signing your own guys, minimum players, and your draft picks.
That's good to know. I appreciate the dumbed down version for me because like I said, sometimes that one goes over my head. I think, like, for me, so you talked a little bit about like the Kevin Durant trade earlier. What would that have had to look like if the Cavs were actually going to pull something like that off? Like, how would they have had to work a deal like that to actually bring Kevin Durant to Cleveland?
Probably, first you're going to have to for sure trade one of the top 3 guys, which is, between Mitchell, Mobley, and Garland. Let's say it was Garland. So they can get to Durant's number by doing Garland and Strus. So that's the 100% match in aggregation. But then they'd still need to shed like another 15 million, I think. So they can get under the second apron as well. So the aggregation would be allowed. So that's probably like Jared Allen or DeAndre Hunter, just to be safe. So they're and also have enough space to get the roster with enough players below the second apron. So I haven't done the full math on what the Kevin Durant 2 Cavs trade would look like, but I'm guessing at a minimum it would be Garland, Hunter, and Strus. That would probably be the easiest way for them to actually make it work.
It's a
lot.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think the Cavs would have wanted to do something like that. And I mean, it sounded like, to your point on, doing multiple things at once, multiple trades at once, they would have had to find a way to package something together to get there. But they also would have had to get under the cap with a couple other, or under the second apron with a couple other trades or moves or whatever. And I know from the conversations or the reporting that's been had, it sounds like it was actually the Suns who called the Cavs and They were offering some maybe picks with Kevin Durant as well, so that would have been interesting. Maybe even the Cavs pick that they now have from the Jazz that they would have given back. So that's all very interesting, obviously, as well. I guess I'm curious, like I led the show talking about, like, there's so many fans out there who get excited. The off season's here. They start thinking about how they can make the team better, and they just open up the NBA trade machine and start spitballing ideas of like, hey, let's put Darius Garland in a package for this guy, or let's put Jarrett Allen and Dean Wade or Max Strus together and get this guy. And it works in the trade machine, but with everything you've laid out, we understand that that's not always the case. So I guess I'm curious, like, what are some of the most ridiculous trades that you have seen so far this offseason, maybe specific to the Cavs, but you can even go down a path of like some other teams as well that would just make no sense whatsoever, would never actually work, but that people were trying to sort of sell as a possibility.
I don't know. I honestly can't remember. I haven't seen too many, but I've seen a lot of people, who cover the Cavs. They've done a pretty good job with, educating each other on what can and can't be done, explaining why that trade doesn't work. So I guess just, trading for a max level guy like a Durant or a Giannis, that's the one where people, I think, haven't fully grasped just how much money is required to come out from the Cavs, not just for the salary match, but because they're above the second apron.
I have one thing too. So as an outsider looking in, and I'm always on this with Spence, talking about how more of the national media and the fans that are looking from the outside in appreciate what the Cavs have going on more than what people here locally do. So as just a completely innocent bystander, what do you think about where the Cavs are in their steps as an organization to get towards that top tier?
I mean, I think they're already in that top tier. I think they proved it last year. They just got injured. I think there is obviously some stuff to be concerned about. A lot of people point out to, like, do they maybe they lack toughness, stuff like that. So there are things they could work on the margins to address those needs. But winning 64 games is nothing to gloss over, and they should, I think, in my mind, even without seeing how the offseason played out, I think they're in a tier of their own in the East when you consider all the other injuries going on. And as long as they're healthy, I think they should make the finals. I think they got most of their work done these past few years doing the Donovan Mitchell trade, being fortunate enough to select Devin Mobley and Darius Garland, and just doing just some nice savvy moves along the way, trading what ended up being a pretty late first for Jarrett Allen, signing Max Strus, getting DeAndre Hunter for basically just a couple expendable role players. Like, they've done the work, I think. I think they just got to run it back, really, and just give it another go and hope for good health.
I think a lot of people are also just kind of overlooking the fact that they did get DeAndre Hunter at the deadline last year, and they only had him for a few months, and he's going to have a full training camp, a full summer with the team now. Yeah. I want to know what you think about that move, because I feel like that's being looked at as, they got the wing they were looking for, but he's also just kind of this role player, whereas he was a sixth man of the year candidate. This is a guy that can drop 20 on you any night, and he also has extremely long arms and a lot of length, and I feel like this guy could absolutely be one of those core type of players on this team, in addition to they have on the squad right now. So I just want to know your opinion on that, because it's really hard getting traded midseason and just kind of picking up and going. When you actually have a full offseason and a full training camp with a team, that really changes things. And I think DeAndre, especially at 27, 28 years old, just getting into the prime of his career, I think could be a real big contributor.
So I want to relate it to the Knicks, just because the Knicks went through something similar with Karl Anthony Towns getting him on the eve of free agency, really overhauling that core last offseason, and they were able to go pretty far despite all that, and like a very thin bench. And I just bring him up also because I think right now they're the number 2 team in the East, so probably biggest challenge to the Cavs at this moment. But with the Cavs, that's a great point. Again, that applies to DeAndre Hunter. He's going to have a training camp to get a little more integrated. And you can also say continuity as well. They have the continuity advantage in general. This core has now been together for 3 full seasons. they're just going to keep getting better and better the more they play together. They just went through just one season with Kenny Atkinson, who overhauled their offensive system. That's like another big factor, continuity. That's going to be probably like their biggest addition, if that makes sense, to the offseason. Just more time together. That stuff matters.
The fans aren't going to like you for that one, Yos. They started out on your side. And as soon as they heard that, they're going to be like, oh, no, he's a homer like the rest of them, even though you live out in L.A.
Yossi, I'm curious, because I know you talked about running it back and trying to re-sign and bring back guys like Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill. There's been a lot said in regards to Ty Jerome specifically and how the Cavaliers would bring him back. There's not a lot of teams that can really offer him. And it's, Ty Jerome, I don't think is like a premier potential free agent right now. Like there's other guys that I think teams are going to prioritize first, but there's only a few teams that can really offer him more money than the Cavs. Now the Cavs have the mid-level exception, the a little over 14 million, whatever it is. I'm assuming that is from like this past, you said once you hit the second apron, you don't get that mid-level exception. So that would be like next year, they wouldn't get that mid-level exception. Am I reading that correctly?
No, Cavs don't have any mid-level exception now.
Oh, okay. Okay. So they can't offer him that then, is what you're saying.
No.
They can...
With Ty Jerome, they have his bird rights.
That's what it is. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, his early bird rights, technically.
They
can give him up to like 4 for 61. That's which is kind of equivalent to the mid-level. Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. I got you now. Okay.
Yeah.
So along those, go.
I'll just say, like, if they re-sign him to something in that amount, like, then they're probably pushing their total roster expenses to like around 450 million, where their tax penalty would be even bigger than their payroll. So I do feel like there is going to be somewhat of a line when it comes to this stuff, just because at some point you're not getting that much more value per dollar spent. There's going to be diminishing returns. So then if they bring back Jerome, I'd probably get the idea they're going to look to save some money, probably from like an Okoro salary dump or something like that.
Yeah. So if they do bring back, say, like a Ty Jerome, for example, I guess, like, now I lost my train. I had a question. I completely forgot what it was now. I was listening.
I can fill in if you want to think about it. I can fill in if you want to think about
it. How Ty Jerome could kind of get like the mid-level type money.
Actually, you know what? That's what I was going to say was, who are the teams that can, compete with the amount of money that the Cavs can potentially offer with his early bird rights? Yes.
So the Kings, they kind of jump out. They need a guard. I think after last night, maybe not so much. I was thinking Orlando, but now they drafted Jace Richardson. I feel like I'm not like too deep into the draft. You guys could correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like kind of a similar player type. So maybe they're good on there. Detroit, just for the opportunity, they got some money to spend if they want to bring him in, especially if they lose Schroeder. The Hawks, they have some trade exceptions. The full mid-level, they can bring him in. They, depending on what they do, maybe they don't bring back Karis LeVert, they're going to need a guard. There's a couple teams, the Hornets, the Nets, Bulls, like they all have the full mid-level and enough space to use the whole thing. The Clippers, we'll see. There's theoretically a lot of teams that could make a big offer for him.
Is it a possibility for Ty Jerome or Sam Merrill to be signed and traded? Is that something that's It is? Okay.
Yeah, they just wouldn't be able to bring a player back. So if they're signing and trading them, then they're just getting draft picks. Okay. Now, I think with Sam, the only thing with Ty Jerome is because because he only has early bird rights, he's capped at like something around a $14 million starting salary. If you're a team interested in Jerome, you could probably beat that with the full mid-level, in which case not much incentive for a team to sign and trade for Jerome. So I think they might have a harder time sign and trading him, because the whole point of a sign and trade is that one of the points of a sign and trade is then by doing that, you're able to probably beat the market on a particular free agent, because by structuring a trade, you could get creative with how much more money you can pay the guy. With Sam Merrill, he's got full bird rights, so it's a little different. They can, I think they might have a better chance signing and trading him. If another team just if another team just wants Jerome, they could probably just try to sign him outright with the full mid-level.
I found it interesting when you were talking earlier about the tax penalty being potentially bigger than the actual cost of the team. How beneficial is it? And this might be just an obvious question, but to have an owner like Dan Gilbert who's able to foot that bill and say, screw it, you guys spend whatever you want. And can that come back to bite you? Or is that something that, if that continues throughout, even when they have this expensive of a roster, that it's just dependent on who's really in charge of your team?
I think that's a competitive advantage for the Cavs, and he's proven it in the past. The second time LeBron came around, they were in the tax every year. They had one of the biggest tax penalties of the time, and they clearly shown a willingness to spend, and that's great for the Cavs that they're going to keep this level of depth and probably for multiple years spend whatever it takes to sustain this team that they put together.
I'm curious.
It wouldn't really bite them back as long as long as he's okay with the money. It wouldn't really bite him back in any way.
Okay, I was just curious because I remember seeing the stuff with Lacob, a couple years, and that was always just kind of on my mind.
I think that is, to your point, Yossi, like a pretty good advantage for the Cavs that they have an owner willing to do those things and pay into the tax and all that. I'm curious, like, as you think about the second apron, and we're seeing the early effects of it. And Spence, you brought up the comments from, who'd you say it was? Brad Stevens, yeah. And how he mentioned, he wasn't really prepared for what this was going to look like. How, like, in the future, how do you think teams are going to navigate the second apron moving forward? Like, is it going to be what the Celtics just did, where it's like you get there and you just start shedding? Is it going to be people start, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, are people going to start to have more foresight on the second apron where they're doing stuff in years of advance of even getting there? Or do you think it'll be like they'll just max out their team to the point where they get to that second apron and then they have to start making decisions?
So with the Celtics, they didn't have the full extent of the knowledge of what the new CBA was going to look like as they were putting the team together. Yeah, it was like right as the CBA was getting put together. So they didn't really have no team really knew how to plan for this. Now it depends what the thing about the second apron. It seems more like kind of like a trendy word now, where that's kind of the word that when people hear, it's like, okay, this is what's like hurting teams. It's more so restricting teams. The thing that's like hurting teams is that the new tax penalty, which is like, if you're in the second apron, that means you're really deep in the tax, which means now you're going to be paying way more money than you would have in the previous tax system. And that's what's put Boston in the situation where, especially with the Tatum injury and not going as far as they did, where it just doesn't make sense to spend all this money. So that's where it's more applicable to the Cavs, where you've one, how much money do you want to spend? Like, you're going to spend money, but is there a line you're going to have over the years? How much, what level of success will justify how much you are willing to spend? The other thing is the only penalty you get for being above the second apron is getting your draft pick 7 years in the future frozen, so you wouldn't be able to trade it, which is not really that big a deal, because then you can there's a way to get out of that if you stay out of the second apron long enough.
It's like a bigger
the bigger penalty is that and I might be getting I might be explaining it wrong. I don't have how exactly it is, but I think if you are in the second apron in like 3 of the following 4 years, then that original frozen pick then drops to the end of the first round. So that's where that's like I know you said you didn't have the exact wording, but like that's if you're in that span of years leading up to the year that your pick is frozen, you're saying then it would drop to the end of the first round. So for this year, the Cavs, they're probably going to be over the second apron. That means their 2033 pick will be frozen. So then if they're over the second apron again next year, then the 2034 pick will be frozen. If they're over the second apron a third year in a row, then that 23 pick would then drop to the end of the first round. So what teams could do to try, so that might force teams to kind of strategize they're a couple years into the future of which years they'll want to stay over the second apron, how many years in a row. So, because if the Cavs care about that, then they'll probably want to get below the second apron 2 years from now and for the 27-28 season. And that's where I was talking about Donovan Mitchell as that player option.
Yeah.
Now, OKC, they're in this fortunate position where they just won a championship without paying the tax. They're going to not pay the tax next year. Then they're going to pay tax in the following years, but maybe they try to stay below the second apron. So that's why they're probably going to have a pretty long window. But let's say they do want to go over the second apron a bunch of years. They have so many extra draft picks where it might not really matter if their draft pick eventually drops to the end of the first round. But for a team like the Cavs who actually have a draft pick deficit, that might matter. Now, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest where, working in the NBA is there's generally, it's not on average, not the longest tenure type thing. So a front office can just look at this and say, well, I'm not probably going to have the job. I don't care about this draft pick 7 years from now. It's not my money. I don't give a damn. So that's something that could impact a future front office. So that's kind of where ownership kind of needs to step in and decide, okay, well, what's best for me 7-8 years down the line? So we'll see. I would guess for sure these next 2 years, Cavs spend as much as possible, and we'll see after that.
As a follow-up, and I do want to remind people again, if you have any questions for Yossi, send them in the comments. We're going to get to those here coming up momentarily. But as a follow-up to that point specifically, I saw the comments the other day from Josh Kroenke, owner of the Nuggets, who mentioned this crazy scenario where they feel like they have to trade Nikola Jokic because the wrong player gets hurt and they're a second apron team, and so now all of a sudden they have to make this move. Now, first of all, we don't have to comment on those comments specifically because I think it's a little ridiculous. If that's your situation, you'd get rid of anybody except Nikola Jokic and you just start fresh. But regardless, do you think the second apron in its current form is here to stay, or when the next CBA negotiations come up, and I think it's 2030, will they change it to make it less punitive or just get rid of it altogether potentially? How do you see that kind of playing out?
So two things. To answer the basic question, I think that it's probably not going to change that much. Maybe there's some things that get modified, like the future draft pick thing. I think that's kind of absurd. But you'd be surprised. A lot of the owners that a lot of owners wanted this to happen. Even some ones that have spent a lot of money in the past that are with the bigger markets. They were hoping, a lot of people were hoping this kind of curb spending at the top might kind of add more parity in regards to some of the higher spenders. A lot of those higher spenders wanted this. Now, as to that Jokic comment, this kind of goes back to my point where I'm saying, well, I think people are trying to use the second apron as a word to just, it's kind of like this boogeyman, oh, the second apron. And I feel like that comment about Jokic was just kind of maybe in a way trying to let fans know, hey, we might not do anything this summer. And it's because, and he's kind of using the second apron as a way to
temper expectations,
to kind of justify why they might not do anything. Because the thing of the Nuggets, they are close to the second apron, but if they go over the second apron, it's not going to force them to trade Jokic. So they just don't have any draft picks to trade. They have no flexibility. They can't really do anything. So I think it's kind of the owner's way of saying something like, well, we're not going to do anything. And if we do something crazy, then we get in the second apron, and you know what that means. So I think it was just something to kind of let fans know, hey, we're not going to do anything this summer, which I think I don't think they're really going to be able to do much anyways.
Spence, anything else before we get to the comments?
Just a general question, because I think a lot of people point to the negotiations and CJ McCollum and saying how they killed contracts and whatnot, and I just want to know, like, the aprons in general, what is the motivation behind that? And do you think it's working? Because I feel like a lot of the quote unquote middle class of the NBA with those like between 10 to $18 million deals, you're not seeing a whole lot of those as much. And you're seeing a lot more of the super maxes and the max extensions, and then kind of the lower tier towards the bottom of the rosters happening a lot more frequently now. And I just want to get your take on that because we were used to seeing like guys make, annually 12 to $14 million, and they'd be like the fifth or sixth best player on the team, and that's no longer the case anymore, it seems.
I think it's still kind of early to tell if this new apron system is doing its intended effect, because we saw the Knicks last year get around it when they traded for Cat. They weren't, in theory, supposed to be able to increase their payroll because they were above the apron. And then they just signed and traded a bunch of guys to inflate the outgoing amount. So all it really has done is make teams find another way. But then to get around the fact that like some teams can't increase their payroll, you could just get around that by getting a third team involved. So now more multi-team trades.
So it's a lot of loopholes.
So as far as like getting certain trades done, I don't think it's really making much of a difference. I do think, again, because of the new luxury tax system, how it's going to be even more expensive. I think it's gonna have done a good job at shortening a team's championship window. Where this Celtics team they just put together, they had 2 years, and that's it. Maybe they could have had a third if Tatum was healthy. If they made it to the third round, they would have gone for another year of this. But I think now we're for sure going to see a lot shorter windows of like a nice core together, where maybe in previous years, like you could see a team for like 3 to 5 years. You think about like the Warriors, the Cavs from last decade, the Heat from last decade. Maybe that goes down to like 2 to 3 years. Unless you're the Thunder, I think they're going to have like 5 years at least.
Because they have the picks too.
Yeah.
That Knicks situation was interesting. So you're saying if I'm a player and I'm a free agent of the Knicks and they can sign me for $12 million and nobody else can, they sign me for the $12 million, then flip me to somebody else so that they can bring back more salary in a trade. That's basically how they they worked around increasing their payroll for the last season?
Oh, so they were able to do that with their own free agents. What happened was
I was using myself as an example there, but I'm saying like they basically, because they could offer more to their own free agents than another team, they just signed them and then traded them somewhere else, and that by default allowed them to increase the amount of money. Am I understanding that correctly?
Only their own free agents. They had a bunch of guys that like expired on two-way, some minimum guys. They're allowed to do that because it was their own free agents. They can't just be anybody.
Yeah, got you. Okay. All right, we'll go to the comments. We have a few here. I did think it was funny that right as we were talking about Ty Jerome and his contract situation, Ty Jerome Muse actually shared our stream. So we appreciate you, Ty Jerome Muse. But Mel Burke Jr. asked opinions on salary dump of Okoro and Wade, and look to fully put Porter, Tyson, and maybe Amani in the rotation.
I mean, I think Okoro makes sense. I would probably keep Wade. I think he's really good for the Cavs. I don't think you're going to save that much. I don't think like the cost savings that you get from getting off Wade is going to be worth the production that he brings. I think the biggest part right now at the Cavs, Wade's extension eligible. So I'm sure they're going to be trying to negotiate that. If the Cavs could get him on a number that they like, then go ahead and keep him. If I don't really see him as good as he's been getting that much more than what he's making, but if for whatever reason he's trying to push for more, maybe you consider trading him. But I think at that case, just take him to free agency, and I'm sure they could bring him back for a good rate later. But Isaac Okoro, especially now that they brought in Hunter, Strus has held up being really good for them for 2 years in a row. Maybe Jalen Tyson is ready to take the next step. I think the situation with Okoro has drastically changed within the last 12 months where I would totally understand if they dumped him, and they would save a lot of money, which could offset the costs of keeping Ty Jerome.
And also with Dean Wade, knowing their big man situation, I think is also very applicable to that, because that's probably more important and has a little bit more significance than Okoro, who's playing the 2/3, where the Cavs have a ton of players. So that's also, I think, a big part of the difference between those two.
Well, Spence, I want to see more DeAndre Hunter and Dean Wade on the court together. So that would get rid of
Most
that
definitely.
if he was gone.
Also, it
all
would
right.
not be a Courtside with the Cavs on SI podcast if we did not get asked about Amani Bates. I want him to play. I would love to see him get on that floor, but he was an injury issue last year, had to work through that and then get through the ranks, and still eligible to be a two-way player, but it'd be his last year for the Cavs to be able to do that. So we'll see what happens with Amani, but I'm pulling for him. Always pulling for him.
Death, taxes, and Amani Bates questions. Those are always on the docket. Last one here in the comment section. What is the maximum each of you would offer Ty Jerome? I think this is actually a pretty interesting question because we all know how brilliant he was during the regular season. But Spence, as you pointed out a number of times, like he wasn't a good matchup in certain instances with guys that were defending him in that series against the Pacers. But we can go around the horn here. Whoever wants to start with what they would think is like a reasonable offer for Ty Jerome.
16.5 to 17.5. Next person.
Okay.
You're saying annually?
Annually, yes.
Well, they wouldn't be able to give him that. The early bird, the most they can start him at is like, I want to say it's like 13.7. So it's basically like an average of 15 a year with the raises. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cavs can get him back on a little less than that.
Okay.
Last year we saw almost no free agents get the full mid-level. We saw DeAnthony Melton get it, but just for 1 year. I think DiVincenzo 2 years ago was the last free agent to get the full 4-year mid-level exception with the Knicks. There's less money to go around. So also for guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dennis Schroeder, just some of the top mid-level-ish guys, and then Ty Jerome's in that category as well. I feel like we might get a repeat of last summer where we saw guys like Derrick Jones, Najee Marshall get a little less in the full mid-level. I could be wrong. Maybe these guys do get the full amount, but my instinct is that the Cavs could potentially get him back at a little less than the maximum amount he's getting, which would probably then pay him like 13, 14 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think I do think the playoffs are going to tarnish some of the way that people feel about him, at least in the eye of the public and the fans, in terms of like what they think he should get. I understand there's teams out there, as you laid out, Yossi, that can probably pay him more, but if they can get him back on like that in that 13 million range, and who knows, like he may be willing to take a little bit less. I'm not saying he will, because I think like while you can, and he had a tremendous season. But maybe if he's happy in Cleveland and he thinks there's a chance to win a championship, and he's got a friend here in DeAndre Hunter, he's okay with that number. So if they can get him back for that amount, I think that's pretty fair and reasonable. And obviously that would help the Cavs out a little bit as well with their finances. But man, this was awesome. Yossi, some great insight. I appreciate you explaining things to me like I have no idea what I'm looking at, because sometimes I need that when it comes to the cap stuff in the NBA. But I feel like I learned a lot. I feel like this was an informative conversation. Hopefully the listeners felt the same way, because I do think the second apron and everything that comes with it and how teams navigate the cap is a constant sort of, it goes over a lot of people's heads. I think they're just casual NBA fans, especially. And so to get this insight and get a better read on it all, I think is awesome. So I can't thank you enough for joining us today, man. Thank you.
No, of course, you're welcome. I think the best way to simplify, the Cavs can't really do anything. Don't expect them to do anything.
I like that
to the point, baby.
I was going to say, I like that as a tagline to get out of here. Yossi, we'll definitely do this again sometime, man. Maybe if there's a move that is made, we can talk about it or something like that. But in the meantime, man, keep up the good work. Again, you can follow Yossi at his handle there, Yossi Gozlan, or Gozlan, excuse me. He, of course, is the
it's actually more correct the way you just said it.
Is it Gozlan? I'm sorry.
The Hebrew way that's actually more correct than Hebrew, but it's fine. I always go Gozlan.
Oh man, I've just butchered everything today. It's okay. Third Apron podcast, and of course his newsletter as well. So insightful when it comes to this cap stuff, and we're so grateful he gave us some time today. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Spence, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to give Yossi a good chance here to talk about the sports business classroom out in Las Vegas because that's where Summer League's going to be, and he's always a big part of that experience as well.
I will be in Summer League from the 12th through the 19th for also to be involved with Sports Business Classroom. It's a program for learning about certain aspects of the industry, whether you want to be like a scout, get into a front office or in the salary cap, or be an agent, or be in media. They have people, professionals from all different facets teaching about it. I will be involved with the salary cap program. So I think there's still a couple spots available. So you could check out sportsbusinessclassroom.com, see if there is any. And yeah, that's basically the program. Other than that, make sure check out my newsletter and podcast, Third Apron. A lot of salary cap analysis there. I'm sure when the Cavs if they do something, I will react to it. And follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at my name, Yossi Gozlan. I am giving some instant salary cap analysis on each transaction as they happen. Best time of year to follow me, and even have me on notifications.
I'm going to subscribe to the newsletter myself when we get done here, so I can promise you that. And if I was going to Summer League, I was hoping to make it work. I'd be jumping in that class without a second thought. So again, big thanks to Yossi. If you liked what you heard today, if you like what Spence and I produce on this podcast regularly, please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And of course, at the Cavaliers on SI YouTube channel, we'll continue to put out some good stuff over there during the offseason. We might have some stuff as soon as tomorrow because the Cavs have a couple picks tonight. We'll see what they do with them, and we might be having some introductory press conferences. So stay tuned for all that. In the meantime, we appreciate you jumping in with us. We appreciate Yossi, and keep on following along with all things Cleveland Cavaliers with the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI.